Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Top 10 players for this South Carolina program heading into 2024. And Dill, taking on this process of stacking some of the best players, I think a lot of people are counting out this South Carolina program because, yes, they do lose some top-end talent, right? Xavier Legette, Spencer Rattler going to the NFL. This team was extremely young last year. Multiple guys who were freshmen and sophomore playing significant stats for the South Carolina team. But going into 2024, I think this program is a little bit deeper than it was last year. You look at that 2023 team and say the top end talent was there, right? The top 10 scholarship players, extremely good. But when you started getting to that 20 through 50 scholarship players, I think there was a drop off for that South Carolina team. You kind of fast forward to 2024 and say the depth of this roster is in a lot better spot heading into the 2024 year. And if you see some of these young guys take that step in their developmental arc, this team can make some noise in 2024. Fired up to get into it. Before we do it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. And it's been a blast taking deep dives into all of these programs. The amount of support you guys have shown the boys, it truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, let us have it in the comment section. We might be sleeping on some players that you guys should shout out in the comment section. We always learn a ton from you guys. So let the boys have it in the comment section. And without further ado, let's get into this top 10. But Dill, we got to start with my guys, right? Guys that you can't really put in the top 10 quite yet, but all four of these names you see on the screen, I think, have a very good chance to be top 10 players. I'll give you the floor. Who you want to talk about from this My Guys list?
Yeah, I think the big one is Nick Harbor, because you kind of look at what they've lost in terms of their skill positions over the past couple of years. Like, they really do need to replenish that role. They need somebody to kind of step in and be that top tier target, that difference maker. I mean, he has all the talent in the world. You know, he runs freakishly fast at that size. You've seen flashes of the ball skills, being able to get up, make contested catches. Again, you just need to see some consistency, being on the field a little bit more. But he is the guy I think you're looking towards right now, being like, well, we need somebody to step in, fill that role of what you lose in some guys like Juice Wells and others. I think it's got to be him.
Freak athlete. He might be the freakiest athlete in college football. I think I just saw in the spring track season ran a 10.15 at 240 pounds. That's absolutely silly. The thing with Nick Harbor is when we talked about Nick Harbor committing to South Carolina, we kind of said he'd need a year because this was a guy that is extremely raw. I mean, he checks off a lot of the physical traits that you're looking for, but played a lot of edge rusher at the high school level, didn't play a ton as a pass catcher, now making that transition to wide receiver. This kid was raw to begin with, kind of learning a new position. You knew he wouldn't kind of hit the ground running at year one, but going into year two, a full off season under his belt, that's what excites me the most about Nick Harbor. The guy I want to quickly shout out, Lenora Sellers, a really interesting take at the quarterback position. You kind of read the spring practice notes, you read through the tea leaves within the South Carolina program. They think they have a guy in Lenora Sellers. I thought he looked really good in the spring game. I thought he had command of the offense. He's a guy that can give you some of those explosive plays with his legs. I think the upside for Lenora Sellers is extremely high. He could be a top 5 player on this program in 2024 if he does, in fact, put it together. You talk about South Carolina season, I think it starts with 2 guys, or 2 units, I should say. One, the offensive line needs to take a step, and then that quarterback position. I want to give a quick shout out. Dylan Stewart.
He's going to be a guy I think they're going to need to count on, frankly, because I think that edge play was not good enough last year. I don't even think it was frankly close. I mean, I think their interior defensive line, you started to see some strides there, developing guys playing really good. They just didn't get anything, I felt like, from enough of their edge rushers. You look at bringing guys like Kyle Kennard, but Dylan Stewart, I think, is going to get a lot of opportunities. And then you kind of look at that spring game. Looks like he's kind of ready to go. And I think a guy that they need to take that next step on defense, because they have a pretty talented back end. They just need to get more out of their defense.
Yeah, the edge rushing position was a disaster last year for South Carolina. Looking over some of those pass rushing numbers, they were getting all their production from the pass rush on the inside of the defensive line. And it's great. We're really high on this inside of the defensive line for South Carolina in 2024, but you need some edge rushers to step up. It's arguably the most important position on the defensive side of the football. Josiah Thompson, That's another guy. We saw two true freshmen play a lot of football for South Carolina. I think Josiah Thompson, potentially even Cam Pringle, could be guys that give you good reps as year one starters on the offensive line. Dill, let's get into our top 10 players. Number 10, DQ Smith, and this might be a little bit low for South Carolina fans. You go back to the 2023 season, maybe not necessarily the step you wanted to see, but at the end of the day, this is still a very good safety that, most importantly, gives you so much versatility and now experience, right? We talked about guys like Nick Emenari and DQ Smith as youngsters 12 months ago. These are the leaders of this South Carolina defense heading into 2024, has played over 1,500 career snaps all over the field, right? Whether it's box safety, whether it's playing nickel, whether it's playing free safety. When you have a chess piece like this in a defense, it allows you to get very creative. I think DQ Smith has a lot of talent. I would love to see him kind of take that step heading into 2024.
I'm kind of with you because I thought from the freshman year, I think you kind of expected maybe a little bit better in that second year. I think Nick Emenari kind of did take it. I thought he looked really, really good, and we'll see him later in this list. That should be a dynamic elite safety tandem. It was last year. I think DQ Smith, though, I think there is another gear for him to get to for sure.
Let's go to number 9, and I'll kind of take the reins on this one. Jared Brown coming from Coastal Carolina. We covered this when he committed back in the winter. You look at South Carolina, you noted it, trying to replenish some of that offensive skill around the quarterback. Jared Brown's a guy that you can get incorporated in so many different ways, but it starts with what he can do with the football in his hands. And when you have just a playmaker with a guy with the football in his hands, it makes an offense so much more easy to run. And 2 drops on 81 targets. He's extremely reliable, 27 missed forced tackles, 572 yards coming after the catch. If you can figure out a way to get this kid the football in space, he can be a playmaker at the SEC level. And you look at having a young quarterback like Lenore Sellers, I mean, use this guy in a lot of different ways, give him some easy access throws, and let a guy like Jared Brown kind of do the rest. I'm fired up for Jared Brown heading into the 2024 season, going to our number 8 player. Dill, I'll let you take the reins on this one. Tree Babalade, a guy that you saw struggle early on when he was thrusted into a starting role. I thought he played much better towards the tail end of that 2023 season. If you can build on those last couple of games, I think you're looking at a really quality starter for South Carolina going into 2024.
Yeah, I'm be honest. I think you are way too low on him. I kind of go back and watch that Clemson game. I mean, that's a really, really good set of pass rushers that Clemson had. I thought he kind of did, kind of what you said, started to dial it in a little bit. And in that game, I thought played really, really well. He can move guys off the line. I thought the pass pro got a little bit better. He just needs to be solid with his technique, because when you're that big and that strong, you don't need to necessarily be perfect and clean. And again, it got better and better. But I thought that strength, that size, that kind of started to come through, and he started to play really, really good football for them. I frankly think he's a little higher on this list if I had final.
You talk about some of the reasons why this South Carolina team could surprise a lot of people. One is Lenore Sellers, a guy that I think is largely unknown to the college football community, but could be a really good quarterback in the SEC. Secondly is the offensive line. If you come some steps in the right direction from guys like Tree, you could be looking at a very solid offensive line for South Carolina. All the traits in the world for this kid. Fired up for him in 2024. Going to number 7, another guy that maybe I'm a little bit low on because I was a massive fan of this edition. We noted the edge rusher position was, just not good enough for South Carolina in 2023. They not only bring in Kyle Kennard, but Gilbert Edmond coming back to South Carolina. That's an interesting name to file away. We're not going to see him in this top 10 list, but you go back to 2022, he played some really good football for South Carolina. Can he get back to that form is the question mark. Kyle Kennard, 13 quarterback hurries. That led that Georgia Tech program last year, 16 run stops. Would have been the most productive pass rusher for this South Carolina team in 2023. If he can translate that and play in the ACC to the SEC level, another massive addition for South Carolina.
And a really nice physical piece at that defensive end room. Because, again, you also want to see them be able to be a little bit stiffer against the run. I think Kyle Kennard, when you watch him play, very heavy hands, very good against the run, very physical. I think that's another thing they need to add. And again, you kind of want to see those guys like Dylan Stewart develop into really dynamic pass rushers, but I think you still need your Kyle Kennards of the world who can play really every down, play really physical, and be that type of guy.
That's a really good point. Like when you talk about Kyle Kennard, it's not necessarily I'm saying he's going to go for 12 sacks, but he's a guy that is extremely reliable and lets you win on first and second down. And if you can get teams into those third and long situations, maybe Dylan Stewart emerges as an elite pass rusher, pin his ears back. That's a very good recipe for South Carolina going to number 6 until South Carolina just finds these cats that come in young and play extremely well in the secondary. Jalen Kilgore, kind of another one of those guys on that list, second on the team in tackles as a true freshman, only missed 7% of his tackles last year, played a lot of that nickel cornerback spot, held up in coverage, top 5 on the team in run stops. When you have a defensive back playing that nickel role that not only can get it done in coverage, but also give you that run support, that is arguably one of the most important positions we are starting to see at the college football level. I think South Carolina's got to start for the next couple of years and Jalen Kilgore at that nickel role.
And that's the interesting part about this whole safety room is I think you got guys who can play every and I'm including Jalen Kilgore because I think he looked pretty good at safety when he does good coming up from distance, making tackles, not missing a ton of them. So again, you have him, DQ Smith, and Winery. All of them can kind of filter in through that secondary, especially in that interior of the secondary, and play really good football from either spot. So I think that, again, allows South Carolina some flexibility, some ability to disguise what they're trying to do. And I think that's been something you've kind of noticed is they've really developed well in that secondary, both at the corner and in that safety nickel kind of position. And it's really it's been probably the best thing that's been under Shane Beamer, in my opinion.
Outside of the special teams, I probably wouldn't argue with that. Now, I'm excited about youth. I think mentioned it, like the versatility that you're getting from some of those youngsters in the back end. That's really exciting if you're a South Carolina fan. Going to number 5 and Debo Williams. I mean, whenever you have over 100 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, by far led this team in tackles and in run stops, only missed 12% of his tackles. This is a guy that's not necessarily going to be a top 100 NFL draft pick, but you talk about just reliable off-ball linebackers that can go sideline to sideline, work downhill, always seems to be around the football, plays extremely hard. I think Debo Williams is just about as important of a defensive player for the South Carolina team in 2024.
And I agree. I thought, again, like they didn't get great linebacker play as a unit, I didn't think last year. I thought
Stone Bland was just a problem.
Because he was the only guy you could really rely on. I'm kind of excited to see what they can do. Adding Demetrius Knight, I think he's a really, really good player. If that unit can, like, again, take a little bit of steps, they can be a little tougher against the run, let their secondary tee off on teams in those third and longer situations, I think that'll be very helpful for this team.
And we're really high on the defensive line for South Carolina, potentially taking that step, which is certainly going to help the linebacker play in 2024. Going to number 4, O'Donnell Fortune, another just really solid South Carolina defensive back. 55% completion percentage when targeted, faced over 49 targets. A long physical cornerback that can do a lot of different things. But I want to fast forward here. Now, I'm not trying to skip over O'Donnell Fortune. Again, just another really, really good South Carolina defensive back. Let's talk about 2 guys. One, TJ Sanders, who I'll raise my hand and say was not too familiar with this cat heading into 2023. Quite frankly, wasn't too familiar with him when I was taking this deep dive into South Carolina. Production was incredible. 43 tackles, 9.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. Led the team in both tackles for loss and sacks. Was 6th on the team in tackles, playing on the inside of the defensive line. This is an extremely active interior defensive lineman that can penetrate. He can give you pass rush juice on the inside. I mean, him and the next guy we're going to talk about, Tonka Hemingway, Alex Huntley thrown into the mix. They got a nice little staple of interior defensive linemen heading into 2024.
And credit them with the transformation they've made on that defensive line, because I think we go back to 2022.
The problem.
That was something we were like, whoa, what are they going to have? I mean, those guys really hadn't quite emerged yet. But again, you see Huntley playing really well, see Sanders playing really well, Tonka Hemingway. Those guys really stepped their game up. They're playing more physical. They're making a lot of plays. I think they complement each other well. Huntley, big physical guy, does a really good job taking on blocks. Not the playmaker that Sanders and Hemingway are, But again, as a unit, they were playing really, really good football. And that's something we did not see in the early periods of Shane Beamer, kind of with what he inherited.
Yeah. And I mean, I just went tied for third here in Tonka Hemingway and TJ Sanders. I didn't want to have to pick between the two. Tonka Hemingway led this team in quarterback hurries from the inside. And I think that one tells you it's rare to have these big bodies that can give you pass rush juice. It probably tells you a little bit about the edge rushing unit as well. Was third on the team in run stop, still 7 pass breakups. This guy has got big hands, and he gets them big paws up and knocks balls down at the line of scrimmage. That was another thing that kind of stood out to me. I'm a big fan of the inside of the South Carolina defensive line, getting into our top 2 players. And let's go to Nick Emanari. This is a guy that I think can be an All-American safety. I think South Carolina secondary kind of got a bad rep. When you go back and watch the film, a lot more of the problems was the lack of the pass rush as opposed to poor defensive back play. Nick Emanari, third in the team in tackles, 71 tackles, 2 interceptions, 8 pass breakups, only misses 6.8% of his tackles. He can play man coverage from that safety spot. He can come up and run support. It's rare to talk about safeties that can do everything at a high level. This kid certainly can.
And that's the big thing for me. His ability to play the ball in the air, kind of like a cornerback, really, really good stuff. I think his ability tackles obviously extremely well. I mean, that's a really, really low missed tackle percentage. And that's making tackles up around the line of scrimmage, coming down hard, making good plays, not just chasing guys down and grabbing ankles. I mean, he's a physical, imposing tackler in the box. You kind of said it, just an ultra complete safety. He's been playing this way now for a couple of years. I expect huge things from him. I think this might be his last year in college football if he has a big year, and that's not a bad thing for South Carolina.
I would think it is too, because I think this guy has NFL written all over him. Rocket Sanders checking in at number 1. I am a massive fan of Rocket Sanders. You go back to I feel like nobody's talking about him because you look at that 2023 season 1, he dealt with some injuries. More importantly, dealt with an Arkansas offense that was just about as incompetent as it gets in the SEC. You go back to 2022 when they had a very solid offensive coordinator in Kendall Briles. When you look at what that offensive line was, this was one of, if not the best running backs in all of the country, right? Averaged 6.5 yards for carry, went for over 1,400 yards, gives you some pass catching juice as well. And South Carolina wants to get a little creative in terms of how they use their running backs. Rocket Sanders played a lot of wide receiver at the high school level. You are getting a big-bodied running back that can run hard between the tackles, but also when he gets to that second level, has the breakaway speed to hit the big plays. I think he checks off every single box that you want. And if that South Carolina offensive line can take the step that we are kind of expecting heading into 2024, I think Rocket Sanders is a guy that can go well over 1,000 yards in 2024.
I'm kind of interested. Can he go like 1,000 and a couple hundred, or even up to 500? I think you'll see that kind of number because again, South Carolina does like to involve their running backs in that pass game, throw a lot of screens. I think those are things when you've seen Rocket Sanders play really well, that's a big part of his game. So again, being able to run physically in between the tackles, catch the football, work well in space, just a totally complete running back. And that's something I think, again, South Carolina, they kind of use their running back in every way. So you kind of got to be that way when you're on this team.
Left out a lot of good players from the South Carolina list. And again, I think that goes to say, yes, you lose Xavier Legette, Spencer Rattler, and I think a lot of casual college football fans might look at this program and expect a step back when you lose. I mean, a wide receiver that goes in the first round, a quarterback that should have went a hell of a lot higher than he did. I think this team could get better heading into 2024 if you see some development from some of this young talent. Again, Shane Beamer's done a really good job on the recruiting trail. This is the year that you want to see those guys take that step.
And that seemed because they weren't hyper active in the transfer portal. I mean, relatively active for sure, but not a crazy overturn. I think you're starting to see these younger guys be more the focal point of what this team's going to be, where again, they've added some really nice pieces for sure. But I think it's time to, again, make that development pay off, allow that high school recruiting that they've done to pay off, and start to build that program up where it's a little bit more sustainable in the long term.
I think you make a good point. They were active in the transfer portal. They brought in a lot of names, but it was a lot of trying to improve that 20 through 50 scholarships. Like, I think the bulk of this team, the bulk of your contributors are going to be guys that Shane Beamer has recruited.
Yeah, that's like because you look at the starters, it's not going to be a zillion transfers. It'll mostly be guys from in this program.
All right, that'll do it. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas again. It's this team's really exciting. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.